Okay, so finally, the last of the Eastern philosophies that I wanted to look at is I wanted to take just a few minutes here and look at Sun Tzu and the art of war. And I'm not just being coy when I'm bringing this one to the table here. It's probably one of the most important works of antiquity. If you want to win in anything, right, this should be your this book should be one of your guiding philosophies and practical practice ways. Now, one of the things I've noticed, I'm sure you probably have noticed too, anybody that's watching this channel might um, have their ear to the ground of what's going on in Catholic YouTube world. Some of the circles that I would maybe even be fairly sympathetic to. I'm just so even if I were right sympathetic to the traditionalists, they are way too loud. They are always running their mouths. They run their mouths too damn much, right? And they're constantly laying their cards down, giving away everything. And I think this is me just riffing here. Europe and Europeans grew out of and grew into and out of this knightly class, right? The warfare of the knights. And what is warfare of the knights but conflicts of sheer power. And that was fine on a European landscape, but it's not the traditional history of warfare in the world at large. So, you know, in so much as our weaponry and I'm talking about, I mean, the art of war has other applications, but insofar as just the actual applications of war itself, insofar as our weaponry was sort of uh, more advanced than the rest of the world, and insofar as the West's at times commitment to brutality was sort of unified, that the West was able to make it advances out of sheer force. But once the commitment to causes wanes, we've we've been unable to maneuver in the world. The one real exception to it in the European theater, this is just a little interesting history, is when Napoleon was uh, going around Europe, making a mess of everything and conquering all these different areas, he he went into Spain and tried to take over Spain. He was tied up somewhere else, but he wanted to take over Spain, to sort of shut them up and get them out the way. Well, the Spanish, instead of fighting Napoleon head on, the Spanish went and fought a sort of back alley clandestine in the mountains war, from which we get the term guerrilla warfare, right? Guerrilla warfare, which is a much more strategic style of warfare than what the European theaters was used to. So, I mean, and Europeans have always been kind of mystified by the warfare of the Orient, right? People from I mean, you think about the ones that came in to the West. You had Attila the Hun, you had the Mongols right under the Khans. But the reasons that they were so successful is their ideas were always based more on strategy, maneuvering off the battlefield as much as maneuvering on the battlefield. And I see people today and they just run their mouths constantly on social media, about all of their intentions, all that they have. I mean, even I saw these guys the other day, these traditionalist guys, and I think they thought they were just being tough or cool or something, and they were just bragging about all the guns that they had, and they were naming the guns that they had. And PSA, if I have guns, you're not going to know about it. All right. But anyways, they lay it all out. I mean, if you think about like think about the dystopian novels of the 20th century where, these people, these governments and things would come up with these, you know, torturous ways to get information out of people. Well, none of those dystopian novels imagined anything like social media where people would just willingly give all their information about themselves away. I mean, it's so, I mean, I don't have another word for it. It's just stupid. And I mean, it's a tendency in people anyways, I mean, I had a cousin years and I mean, I've got 10 years on him. And I remember years ago, I had kind of taken him under my wing and I was trying to show him some things. And I remember he had this job, some random job he took up. He was still a teenager. And he came and showed me his wad of cash one day. And he had the highest bills out on the top, and I just it's just something that comes to mind. But I remember telling him, I was like, never have your highest bills on the top. If I ever have folded cash on me, my lowest bills are going to be the ones that are on the outside, because you're never like, so if I got ones, that's what you're going to see. Because if you have, like, he had hundreds, right? So he had 100 folded. So at the very least, I know what he's got. I know he's at least got 100, right? You're not going to know what I got, right? And I'll give you even better example than that. Um, our parish priest, he's moved on now, but at the time, um, when he took over our parish about 10 years ago, it had been boomer wrecked. All right. I mean, it was pretty awful. I mean, all the statues had been removed, wall to wall carpeting. They had removed all the light. They had removed the high altar, removed the altar rail. Everything had been ripped out. Well, we were slowly making these changes, right? And I came in not long after he took over the parish. And this is a Novus Ordo parish, right? And he was a very, very traditional leaning priest. And he started making all of these changes, like ripping out the carpet, replacing things, making the parish look like it was originally intended to look. But when you went on the website, it was always the original picture of the wrecked boomer parish. And I asked him one day, I was like, why don't you update the picture on the website? And he's like, the less that people know, the better. And at that point, I never said a word about it again. As a matter of fact, we somehow we ended up on there is a website where you look up traditional masses, and somehow we ended up on that website. So it's like if you're traveling, I think it helps. And I was like, oh gosh, our cover's blown now. But we sort of followed his lead and we kept our mouths shut, right? Like you just wouldn't have, like, word was spreading about kind of our parish, but it wasn't like you couldn't just go to the website and tell what we were. And I mean, ours is very much a cultural war, and cultural wars take time. And I mean, honestly, they take generations, right? I think so much of what people expect nowadays, and this is a millennial thing. Hopefully, if there's any Zoomers watching this, Generation C kids, if you're younger, don't. I've heard some of you. All right, I just want you to know I've heard some of you, and I appreciate some of the things I'm hearing from your generation. Some of it, at least some of the Catholic ones. Not so much with I'm a millennial, and not so much with the millennials. The millennials are running their mouths a lot. They're talking horribly about the bishops and the priests. So one of the things right off the bat, right? Respect your bishop, respect your priest, even if it's a bishop you don't like. All right, respect them. Keep your heads down and just keep moving forward. Don't draw attention to yourself, right? Raise your kids right to do the same thing, and eventually, right, these things will come to bear on us, right? Because the thing about Sun Tzu and the thing about the art of war, it is probably the most anti-war book that's ever been written. It's about defeating opponents before the battle even starts. And Sun Tzu says that the way that you do that and his key philosophy could be summed up in one word. The China with Confucius and with Sun Tzu, it's a very Chinese thing to have like little pithy statements, right? They're very interested in their like into their little pithy like one-liners. And Sun Tzu says that if you know yourself and you know your opponent, you will fight 1,000 battles and never lose. And you think, I mean, there's a lot to that statement, right? You know yourself. And knowing yourself means one, knowing your weaknesses and knowing the position that you're in. And you traditionalists that aren't in a position of, you know, strength, you should shut up, right? And keep your nose to the grindstone. And you ones that are running your mouths all the time, you're just bringing attention, and you're bringing that, especially when you're running your mouths and you're, I mean, what is it? The traditionis custodes, right? Like you guys asked for that. Traditionalists 100% asked for tradition. If you'd have just kept your mouth shut, right? So in that respect, I truly I recommend The Art of War, right? You should pick this one up and you should read it. It should be required reading in school, as a matter of fact. Learn it and teach it to your kids. And as that's kind of what I was getting at when talking about the Zoomers. Um, I think that's the Generation Z, whatever they call you guys. Um, you guys really need to be taking up a lot of this stuff. And my recommendation, if you don't take up any of the stuff that I picked up for you today, definitely read The Analects by Confucius. It's worth it. And for sure, read The Art of War. And if you're really interested in I mean the deeper stuff is going to take